Well, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I can see lots of familiar faces in the room, so it feels like a friendly audience, and it enables me to speak in a lot more of a relaxed manner, which is always easier to get a message across. Hilary, a bit like you, from an Islamic family, we did not drink either. But mind you, if you knew my family, you'd probably be tempted, minded to want to drink, actually. I just want to talk about difference lies at the heart of all of this, and we've got to try and overcome that difference, and that's why words like integration are used. But I think sometimes they get lost in translation because it almost is it's a label that nobody can relate to. But what we're actually trying to do is being able to be different, coexist, and have respect for one another. I mean, it is said that the Almighty Allah, Almighty God, had He had wanted us all to be the same, He would have made us all the same. But indeed He never. He made us different for the reasons of being able to be different. So with difference we can learn from one another, so it helps the human race develop. With difference we can learn to love one another, so it helps with tolerance and patience. And with difference we should be able to live with respect for one another. It is not a competition, which it seems like it's become. It is not about status, as one different form is better than another different form, but it seems to become like that. And this is not about inequality, where one form may look down upon another form as being slightly beneath them, almost like beneath a lower social class. It should be about difference coexisting, and that actually, in my view, is at the heart of what drives this adversity, the intolerance and sectarianism, because that's where the divide is. George, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm neither a scholar of Islam, but I do know a little bit about Islam because I'm Islamic. I am not an academic, although I've got 2 O-levels when I left school, but I don't preach to be any of that. But what I am, and what I believe in, where my life has been dedicated, especially over the last 5 years in London, I'm responsible for communities. That's 8.2 million people across 32 boroughs. We have 104 neighbourhoods, we have 624 wards, and I operate in amongst all of those, dealing with communities all the time. And I think the Metropolitan Police, although we get a lot of things wrong sometimes, but we also do our best to try and understand communities. As a small example, we were aware that the Louise Casey report was going to come out on Monday. I never thought, and I don't think it'll ever lead to protests or riots on the ground like we saw in 2011. But what I did think is actually it may be troubling to some elements of our community, and that troubling issue may cause anxiety, may cause a little bit more fear, may cause uncertainty. And that's why over the weekend we as Metropolitan Police have been doing what we call community monitoring to understand sentiment and feeling within our communities. So when we can see things that are troubling people, we can engage, we can communicate, and we can help soothe things through. Now, that's the sort of policing that I think works really, really well. Sometimes I also believe that the world we're looking in is actually a number of protest groups are just looking for a good cause, as opposed to a good cause then attracting proper, legitimate protests. And some of that activity may well be misinterpreted mischievously as we are prying, we are targeting, we are intrusively surveilling, we are spying, and we're not. That's not what this is about. This is simply about trying to get the best understanding as close as we can to human beings in our communities, so we understand that feeling. I think the real danger, there's a number of dangers. I think one of the big risks that we face with is 4,000 miles away. It's what's actually happening in Iraq and Syria. And a lot of people blame that with maybe Daesh and what they're doing, and that is a problem. But also around that is a sectarian conflict between Sunnis and Shias within that. And some people believe that actually the ISIS brand is a way of standing up to the Shia intolerance and the attack that's going that way. But irrespective of which way you look at that equation, we have got sectarian violence that's occurring on a scale that we've never seen it before. In the UK, 20 years ago, if a Sunni and a Shia, there was a cross marriage between the two, there may have been an eyebrow that was raised thinking, how are they getting on with different beliefs? But nevertheless, it was accepted. today we are seeing a lot more antagonistic and violent language of difference, and that's I see that I pick up examples at a young person level within schools, as well as at a community level, and that's what we're fighting at the moment. And this is where I think tolerance and integration must count. By integration, what that means is we as communities don't just stick to our own community and feel safe confined in that, because that in itself is not going to help social mobility, job prospects, help us get out of deprivation in deprived parts of the community. That's just going to keep it static. What we need to be able to do is work with all communities and bring benefits such as health, such as status in terms of opportunity for employment, such as increasing your quality of life. And that's what integration is about. And that's about being able to live with each other as different communities. But if it was that easy, I suppose it would have been done by now. And I think at the heart of this lies this identity issue. Some people call it identity crisis. I'm not so sure what everybody means by that. But in my book, I think there's certainly an issue with identity. If I just relate that to the Islamic Muslim community, I can see what goes on there. Because people like my parents who came to this country came and they were devout Muslims. I'm a devout Muslim. But I don't blame them for wanting to cling on to their traditions and their customs, because that's all they knew. And I'm not so sure they expected the UK to be their home on a permanent basis. It was felt very temporary. So they're in that degree of flux where they're holding on to what they knew and what they cherished without losing it, and trying to bring up their children in a way that actually respected that and hopefully took on some of that. The second generation that came along, I think, divided a little bit. Some people just replicated simply what their parents were doing in that fashion, and I think that's hindered development, if I'm honest with you, social progression. And another part broke away, and in that breakaway part where they're trying to seek who they actually are, some of them have tried to reach out to a more pristine form of Islam, and that's where I think that we've seen Islam being expressed more by the hat, the veil and the beard, which is fine, which is absolutely fine, but it just denotes to me a difference that's taken place. And I think that difference should be respected. I think that difference is sometimes under attack with Islamophobic attacks, which are increased, and I did a piece on the media about that earlier. But within that context, you've not only got different communities who are trying to relate and integrate, and some are not movable, they're static, but within the community itself, I think the community has to recognise there's tensions within that community. And I think there's tensions between the generations, but within the generations, I also think there's a tension between male and females. I see a lot of females within lots of Muslim communities who are progressive, who've got ambition, who've got talent, who've got potential, and really want to go for it, sometimes feeling held back by the norms of their culture, which is not in any way religious. I also feel that they, through this desire, what they're trying to do is absolutely reach a maximum potential of their own lives. And what I'm not talking about is assimilation. Nobody talks about you must behave like me or behave like that community. That's not the point. But when I talk about these protest groups looking for a cause, that's the sort of thing they'll pick up and very potently put out there. And it's suddenly, before you can have a really nice conversation and understand one another, what you get into is an argument where somebody's attacking you, you're trying to defend it, and it all gets completely distorted and you miss the point. And one of the reasons I was late today, and I'm sorry about that, you might think that I had a very important policing mission on, or a very important operation, or maybe we've made some big fast track arrests on the way. It was none of that. I got distracted by the television. I was walking out of the office and the Victoria Derbyshire show was on, and they were talking about Prevent on there. They were talking about Prevent and my human rights and all of that, which is fine to discuss. And there's the label of Prevent's become toxic, whether you believe in that or not. If I just go back to my point that I tried to make a couple of moments ago, actually Prevent is an endeavour through law, by institutions, by communities, by religious groups, to try and safeguard communities. Because bringing it back into the focus of just Muslim communities, actually it's Muslim communities themselves who are the ones who have been targeted, maybe using this identity crisis to try and get in with their potent, evil, ideological messages, which are done in a super 4D, high-tech way that's really compelling. And if you add religious tones and textures and recitations of the Quran, which are done in the wrong way, suddenly you can see how somebody's going to get manipulated quite quickly. I have another fear, and this is a Mak Chishty view, where with Brexit showed us something. And from that I thought there was some degree of intolerance which was expressed, which is perhaps hidden. We've seen the same with the election of Mr. Donald Trump. I'm not criticising democracy, but I'm just trying to recognise what that means. We've got France where Marine Le Pen is being talked about quite a lot. And if we don't manage these situations properly and maturely, and if that leads to further disaffection, if that leads to further lack of feeling of belonging in a country where you think it's perhaps hostile, becoming more racist, becoming more Islamophobic, you can see how that then opens up a further degree of a pool in which these ideological, venomous messages can take you. I mean, we've got 800 people who've left the UK to join ISIS. That's no small number. But as the occupied territories around Syria and Iraq are regained, I think there's going to be further diffusion of this threat. The ideology isn't necessarily going to go away just because the physical ground has been retaken. And I think that's where we have to become more resolute, more integrated, and more together. This is why we've got a campaign in the police, We Stand Together campaign, where we stand shoulder to shoulder as communities, being completely anti-hatred, driving out any form of extremism, and as good neighbours and good people looking out for one another. Because this is such a personal thing, and this first signs of anybody changing who's perhaps becoming more extreme or more radical or more violent are so subtle. The only people who are going to recognise that, those early signs, are going to be people who are first degree associates, your brother, your sister, your mother, your uncle, your auntie, your next door neighbour. And my appeal therefore is that neighbourhoods have to work together in identifying first signs of change, because the earlier we can detect something that's perhaps not going right, we have the earliest opportunity to intervene, and perhaps through pastoral care, through education, through support, through working together as communities, we're able to repel that. And you can imagine a situation if we all did that at a community level, I think we'll become pretty robust and impenetrable in terms of whatever ideological attacks that try and penetrate us through our mobile phone, our tablet, our mobile device, whatever it is, because you can no longer just put a padlock on your door, you yell lock, close your door and think we're secure. It's not like that. The world's changed, and it's changed over the last 12 months. So we have to be alive to that. This is why we have to work in communities. And I'll just finish off on why I think the UK is doing really well. That doesn't mean we are completely safe. As the Commissioner said, it's a question of probably when, not if. So let's keep alive to that risk. And in that, in our attention to that, I think we can gear up to make ourselves pretty, or reduce the risk to the lowest levels it can. So, neighbourhood policing, we have officers in neighbourhoods every single day. And the whole idea there is to provide a familiar, friendly presence where people can know people at a local community level, where we can have that understanding, where we can deal with small bits of difference, we can deal with some of the adversity, and we can help bring people together in a way that communities stay strong and cohesive. And I think that pattern of neighbourhood policing, which has been around since 1827, since Sir Robert Peel, I think that has remained good, and we've got no intention of changing that. If anything, there's a desire to strengthen that by putting further officers in there. So we have engagement, and we have relationships, and we have that fortitude, ability that no matter what happens, whatever threats or risks we face, we're able to remain strong. And it's just not terrorism. It could be child sexual exploitation. It could be cybercrime. It could be anything, which is different to some of the traditional crime forms that we're used to dealing with. And in that respect, I think we have to remain strong. So my final messages are, actually this requires a commitment, a true commitment. It doesn't require people sitting in the audience, people like me speaking, actually a halfway house is good enough. It's not. The danger is real, and we've got to accept that. I think communities also need to understand that actually the only way we're going to deal with this is not through the intelligence services or security services, like we did very successfully in parts of Northern Ireland, because this is ideological. This is about spirit, it's about how people feel, and that's why we need communities to come together. And the last thing, if I may just finish up upon, is actually let's focus on the real points. Let's not get distracted by some of the noise. The real point is there is a danger, there is a risk, there's a threat. We're only going to deal with this if we deal with it maturely together. Let's really believe in our values of harmony, of cohesion, of respect for one another, being tolerant of all religions, and let's leave those antagonistic differences to where they belong, which is in the gutter. Let's concentrate on the good of mankind. And in that way, I think, if we can spread these messages and really believe in it, I think we'll make a difference. And that's why you're so important, because I believe audiences like this, events like this, absolutely help us to bring together and create advocates going forward. Thank you very much.
Could I, on behalf of everybody, thank Matt for that thoughtful but also analytical look at the way things are going and where we need to go, the direction we need to go in the future. I'm sure we'll all be reassured that there are people at the very senior positions in the Metropolitan Police who hold that way of doing things close to their heart. So I'm going to invite questions from the audience. If people could say who they are and what their interest is, and then if they want it directed to the whole panel or to one particular member of the panel.
Mohammed Amin, Chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum. We've heard from Dr. Azmayesh about interpretations of Islam that seem entirely compatible with human rights, and similarly Baroness Armstrong mentioned the Ismailis, and everything I know about the Ismailis indicate their strong support for human rights.
Yeah.
But equally, there are plenty of Muslims, both in other countries overseas, where they promote policies that are very incompatible with human rights, such as trying to execute people if they want to leave Islam. And more locally, in this country, we have people putting forward such views, which, while they're 5% of the population, are not too threatening unless they want to go in for individual action, but if they were 55% of the population, I would get rather worried. And in this country, how do we deal with the fact that there are people trying to promote versions of Islam that are very incompatible with human rights? That's my question for the panel.
Thank you. Yeah, well, Mr. Mohammed, I mean, that's a really good question. It gives me the opportunity to go on to my soapbox for 2 minutes. It really does.
All the time.
You're talking about, I think you're talking about different nation states where they have different policies. I think before we get onto that, I think we need to get our own house into order in the UK. I think that there's an enormously powerful diaspora from all around the world that are residents in the UK who can reach and influence other communities as well in their home nations. I think that's the way they can do it. I personally feel that every time Islam is distorted, and I'm obviously a Muslim, it's a personal violation where somebody is espousing something who has got the appearance of being an Islamic preacher, saying it in such a way which is quite compelling and believable, but every tone of what they're expressing seems to be wrong. It seems to be wrong, not because I know the ground, but it just doesn't seem right. That a religion cannot be saying those type of things. Some very quick examples are one that's cited all the time as a justification for violence is in 3 parts of the Quran. It says, "Kill them wherever you find them." Now that was said under certain conditions at the height of battle, when you're at that time under attack. And as you know, the prophets, the wars were only the wars took place over 9 years. Over 9 years. There's only 11 hours of war. There was less than 500 people killed. The conditions of war, that there's only one person who was elderly, lost their life, one woman who lost her life. So it's very controlled, and it was a self-defense, not in this climate where they're saying that anybody who's not a Muslim, you should kill them because they're apostates. And what I find really infuriating and frustrating is actually there's not enough people who understand Islam. There's not enough of a Muslim voice correcting that. I mean, it's violating our religion, it's violating the virtues of a really great religion. but there's not enough going back saying actually that is total wrong. And it's not just wrong, it can almost be blasphemous because you're distorting it. And I would like to see a lot more of that in correcting it. It's a bit like women's rights. I mean, as an Islamic, I know that the sanctity of a female is, and the respect is above anything else, because that's the example set by the Prophet. And when I see abuse, when I see misogyny, when I see their rights being taken away from them, I actually think, how is that compatible with Islam? And it's not. And when I say we have to start closer to home, I see examples of that in the UK. I'm the person who leads forced marriage, unabated abuse, FGM, breast signing, all of these cultural practices, which somehow are Islamic. They're not. They predated Islam in any case. And there has to be enough of a revolution, I think, by us taking the ground back and saying, actually, it's not Islam. How we do that, I'm not a political figure, I don't get into that space, which I don't belong in that space, but I do use my influence to say, this is all we need to do. Apart from law and order perspective, I just think from the mankind, value-driven approach, we need to do that.
Yep.
I've got 4 people. What I'm going to do, we don't have a lot of time left. So I'm going to take all 4 people, all 4 questions, and then we'll try between us to answer them.
Yeah.
I'll start with Baroness. Right, there's quite a lot to go at there. First of all, is the question as to how we, groups like the one that Baroness Berridge and I both belong to, should be operating to make things to be more constructive. I think that was...
Yeah, and the strength of Article 18 in the UK and responsibility on the majority community form diversity.
There's the question of the extent to which young Muslims in particular feel that the state, through surveillance and other means, are targeting them indiscriminately. There's then a raft of issues around the rights of women, both in terms of human rights and legal rights and the registration of marriages. And I think I don't know quite who wants to deal with them. I think, Mak, you've got something you want to say.
I'll try and deal with them briefly, if I may. But they're big issues, and it'd be lovely to take opportunity and discuss it all afternoon. But I think it's really powerful when the rest of the community or other communities come together and they support Islam as a peaceful, tolerant religion. I mean, I think the best example powerful example I saw of that was 2 days after the tragic and awful killing of drummer Lee Rigby, where we all assembled in a centre in Islington with leading politicians at the time, and they all came together and they were saying, this is not Islamic, this is not Islam, this is evil, this is terrorism.
Yeah.
And I think that worked really, really well. In terms of religious harmony and beliefs, I do think more work needs to be done, because I think there's an intolerance around different strains of religion, and where people, if I've understood the question properly, where people have a different religious belief or different sect of the same religious belief, I think there's intolerance towards it, and some of that is within our mosques. And we saw some of that with the unfortunate murder of Asad Shah, who was an Ahmadi. We see some of that tensions between Salafi Muslim groups and maybe some Sunni Muslim groups. We see that between Shias and Sunnis at the moment, and I think there's got to be a lot more work within that environment to bring harmony. I think that work is the responsibility of that community itself, because anybody else trying to say, actually, can you have religious tolerance and harmony, will just be seen as a foreign voice. They'll always think that you're not one of us. But it's more powerful, driven from the inside, with leading imams, leading scholars, and leading influential voices saying, this is how we work, this is how it's always been.